Welcome back, Wavesa, and today I figured that I'd take a look into the only anti-tank that Tau have. And to be completely honest, it's not much, but what we do have is pretty dang good. So the two main anti-tank things that the Tau have are our Hammerheads and our Broadsides. The Hammerhead Gunship for the longest time been the iconic Tau anti-tank. In the lore, it has been known to, with one single shot, cleave an entire Leman Russ battle tank all the way through, rendering it inactive. And similarly, the Broadsides with their heavy rail rifles are equally as potent in their damage. Now, the catch is, when we look at these two units, they have one side that is geared more towards the anti-tank, seen by their rail rifles, and they have another side that is geared more towards an anti-horde or anti-elite style, seen by the Hammerhead Gunship with the ion cannon and the Broadside battlesuit with the high-yield missile pods. Now, I will be making the argument that their anti-tank is the way to go, and their anti-elite / anti-horde is quite lackluster. So first and foremost, we're going to start off with the Hammerhead Gunship, and it is quite the impressive unit. It has a 10-inch move, which is very nice and mobile, T10, a 3-up save, 14 wounds, a 7+ leadership, and an OC of 3. Now, I would say that it is fairly durable, but not the most durable as far as tanks go. It's not as durable as your typical Leman Russ, but it is more lethal than one. We've got its secondary systems available for this thing, and those include the smart missile systems, the gun drones, and the burst cannons. And let's be real, every single time you're going to be taking the smart missiles, because the gun drones are just redundant, and they have less range and don't have indirect, unlike the smart missiles. And coupled with that, the burst cannons only have 18-inch range. Sure, the strength is up and the AP is up, but they're not twin-linked. And also, I don't think anyone should be within 18 inches of anything with their Hammerhead Gunship. That thing is long range, you better keep everything that way. Now, coupled with that, you have the Railgun for the primary, or the ion cannon for its primary. The Railgun is a one-shot, and if it hits and wounds, it will kill whatever it touches, unless you're shooting into something with an invuln. So if you got big, scary things that you're trying to gun down with Railgun shots and it has an invuln, you better hope you get that 6, or else you're just bum out of luck. Now, as bad as that might seem, rolling a 1 or rolling a 1 into a 1, because of how high the strength is on this gun and how high the AP is and its lethality, or someone making their 50-50 invuln shot, as devastating as that is, somehow the other option is even worse. The ion cannon has a measly strength at best of 8, and that will not do anything against any vehicles. It will not be able to vehicle duel, but I think that's precisely what it's intended to not do. It's much more of an elite killing thing when it gives it blast, because it's D6 plus 3 shots with blast. And it seems very highly geared towards mincing up Marines, even though it has AP1 not overcharged and AP2 overcharged. I really don't like this because it really detracts from the lethality that it could have. The lessening of AP will make normal Marines only on a 4-up and Terminators on a 4-up. Theoretically, if these guys are in cover, then they will ignore that measly little pip of AP. And sure, if the Hammerhead is guided by something with a Markalite, then it will be able to ignore cover. But that being said, you can still have Marines pop a strat that will negate 1 AP, and same with the leaks of Votan. So what I'm trying to say is the minimal AP that it has really reduces its efficiency. Let's say you got a best case scenario. You're going into something that you will maximize the number of shots and also maximize its lethality. That would be a 10-man Terminator brick. You'll have the 2 extra shots because there's 10 guys in there from blast, and you will also have it overcharged, and it will do 3 damage, which is what it needs to do in order to hurt these Terminators, and AP-2 will push it up to their 4-up invuln. So every failed save will kill a Terminator, but if they're in cover, that worsens it. And if they spend the strat, let's say they're being led by a captain who gives them a free stratagem, a phase, or a turn or something like that, they'll get Armor of Contempt. So they're still saving on 2s, unless you give them the guiding with something with a Markalite, then they'll be saving on 3s. But still, that is pretty dang good odds. And you'll only be hitting on 3s too. Sure, you get 1 free reroll either on a hit or a wound, but hitting on 3s, you've got 11 shots. If you max it out and roll the 6, and then you get the 2 from blast, 11 shots, you hit on 3s, you're most likely going to hit about 8 of them on a good day. And then you're wounding the Terminators on 3s, and, well, you're probably going to get about 5 or 6 of those if you're lucky. And then they're going to have to make their saves, and if 5 or 6, they're most likely going to make 3 or 4 of those, which means they might lose 1 or 2 on a... This is like on a best case scenario, and you need Markalighted, and like these guys are just popping their free strat, and this is... It just seems like a lot of work, all for something that doesn't do the job that well. I would sooner take a Riptide and have it run the Ion Accelerator because it just gets flat 6 automatically. Sure, there's no blast, but it's more durable because it has a 2-up save and a 4-up invuln. Sure, it's only T9, but that 4-up invuln really helps if anything anti-tank tries coming after it. And not to mention, the Riptide, its damage is just way better. The armor penetration on its base is -2, and so when it overcharges, it's -3. And its base damage is 3 damage, and it goes up to 4 when it's overcharged. It seems like to me that the lethality that you can give a Riptide is just far greater than that you can give a Hammerhead. And sure, the prices of the Riptide is a little bit greater than the prices of the Hammerhead, but at the end of the day, the Riptide is just far more versatile, and I think you'd be willing to cough up those extra points instead of taking the Ion Cannon. I'd just take the Rail Cannon, because the Rail Cannon reigns supreme when it comes to anti-tank. Anti-Horde and Anti-Elite or Anti-Elite Horde, we have covered in spades across the board. Literally take anything else other than this Ion Cannon and you'll be doing just fine. Now, as for the Seeker Missiles, those are great. Those are the best things ever. Getting Tech 2 onto them, onto your trusty old Hammerhead and fire them off at the start of the game. Brilliant, very good. Have no complaints about that. So now we're going to go on to our other anti-tank, and that's the Broadside Battlesuits. We're going to start off with the drones that you should take on these guys. There's only really 2 that you should go for, the missile drones or the shield drones. The shield drones give you 2 extra wounds, which is really nice, pumping up to 10 wounds, making you more durable, and the missile drones give you 4 shots with ballistic skill 5+, 4 when they're guided, strength 7, AP -2, and 2 damage. That is a very nice sweet spot for AP, because the high yield missile pods in the primary department of the Broadsides is very lackluster. These guys only have AP -1 with 6 shots, 2 damage, and they're hitting on 4s. You know what you can do for this price, for this wonderful price? Sure, it's twin linked, but that's not too terribly impressive, and the range is average. Nothing feels very high yield about these missile pods. I can give you an Enforcer Commander for the same price as one of these guys, who will natively hit on 3s, who will be able to have, oh yes, 6 missile pods again, have the same 2-up save, be able to have a 4-up invuln, bump its wounds up to the same number as the Broadside with 2 shield drones, and it will be leaps and bounds better. Sure, its missile pods are not twin linked, but on that same note, when you're hitting better, you'll have more things to roll to wound anyways. Just my humble opinion. And if you really wanted, you give it Precision of the Patient Hunter or something like that, and it will be hitting on 2s and getting a +1 to wound once it turns turn 3. Like, just, you could make something so much better with the missile pods than these pathetic Broadside Battlesuits. Like, 2 of these is 20 points less than 3 Crisis Suits, but the Crisis Suits will give you, oh yeah, like 6 more shots with their missile pods, and they're just far more mobile, and they'll have 4-up invulns. The math doesn't add up. You have so many other things that could do missile pods better than the Broadsides, so there's no good reason why you should take them. The heavy rail rifles, on the other hand, are an absolute must take. 2 shots per heavy rail rifle really bumps up their ability to do damage and hurt things, and strength 12 is very nice. You'll be wounding just about all vehicles on 3s, maybe big titanic things on 4s, but still, that's better than 5s, which is everything else that we have, like our fusion blasters. They do a very nice amount of good damage, and devastating wounds is always nice to add in there. So if you couldn't get what I'm going for in all this, take the anti-tank options on the Broadsides and the Hammerheads. Their anti-elite and anti-infantry are just filled by other units far better. Not to mention, the rail rifles are iconic and it looks super cool. Now, my usage of these guys on the battlefield is fairly simple. I always start with my Hammerheads on, or I have my Broadsides in reserves to come in to get a good angle on my enemy's vehicles. Other than that, they're fairly tanky, and it takes a lot to take out Broadside Battlesuits, so it wouldn't be too bad to have them starting on the board. But having them in reserves makes it nice for you to get a little peekaboo on your opponents and pick the angles that you need. Otherwise, you put a Hammerhead in a certain position on the board and you will just lock down that aisle, that line of sight. Or you put them in a position where they can move into an alleyway, and they will shut off lanes because people will not want to move their vehicles into the line of sight of the Hammerhead because of just how devastating they are with their rail rifle. You move a vehicle out there, you're guaranteed your hit and wound because you get a plus to hit against monsters and vehicles. So already hitting on 3s, you get your marker light, you're hitting on 2s, you get a free reroll. Strength 20, you're wounding everything on 2s unless it's for some reason T11, then it's 3s, but you still have your reroll in your back pocket. You have a normal reroll and a CP reroll. There's no reason why you shouldn't kill a vehicle that you point at, or if not, severely hinder its ability to do damage to you on the following turn. As for the broadsides, like I said, keep them in reserves. It'll freak out your opponent. They won't know exactly how to deal with it, and when they come in, they'll just blow away one thing that they point at, most certainly, and if not, they will severely damage it. It will make their opponent try to be more cagey and hide more things, which is nice because you always want to slow how fast your opponent moves up the board when you're Tau. I once ran a spam infantry list. It was a bunch of strike teams, literally the worst infantry that Tau could have, even though I love hyping them up. They're really good for what they do, but you just have to use them in that way. And purely because I have a Hammerhead Gunship sitting on one of my flanks, my opponent refused to move any of his big guns or big vehicles out into the open to threaten my strike teams sitting on the objectives. Fun fact, the Hammerhead was long strike, didn't kill a single thing all game. Didn't even wound a single thing all game with his main gun. It was pathetic. But the threat that my opponent felt by simply being on the table and being in that general area kept him from moving forward and threatening any of my objectives. These guys are quite honestly a distraction Chronifex and a good scare tactic to use against an opponent because they just won't want to move out into the open because they know that their vehicles will just get picked up. But I digress. I personally think if you're running long strike, definitely add another Hammerhead on, help them buff it a bit. But I think that's a completely different topic for another time. Anyways, those are just my thoughts on Hammerheads and Broadsides. I hope you like it. I hope you realize that you shouldn't take the anti-elite and anti-infantry options for the ion cannon on the Hammerhead and the high-yield missile pods on the Broadside. Just give yourself a Commander and Enforcer battlesuit with missile pods. It'll do the same thing but better. And get yourself Riptide. It will do the same thing but better for the Hammerhead. Just know what exactly you're gearing things towards, and at the end of the day, anti-elite and anti-infantry is hands down best done by the crisis suits and by the breachers and by other smaller things. You don't need your heavier gun platforms to be taking on weaker things. You need your heavier gun platforms to be knocking out the big guns. We don't have really any good anti-tank. This is the only good anti-tank we have, so make sure you keep that in mind when fielding these guys and when building your models. Anyways, that's besides the point. I hope this is enlightening for some of you guys, or that you like what I'm saying. If you disagree, please let me know down in the comments why you think different types of loadouts would be more optimal for these guys. But I digress. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope your day goes for the greater good.